The streets were eerily quiet that evening, the golden hues of the setting sun casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. Olivia Parker had been driving home from a long shift at the veterinary clinic when something unusual caught her eye. At first, she thought it was just a pile of discarded trash near the alleyway, until she saw it move. Her heart clenched as she pulled over, stepping out cautiously. The smell of filth and dried blood hit her before she even reached the heap of matted fur and bones that lay trembling against the cold cement. It was a dog, a pit bull, so emaciated and battered that it barely resembled the strong, muscular breed known for resilience. The sight was gut-wrenching. Deep scars crisscrossed its body, fresh wounds still oozing, and its ribs protruded sharply beneath its filthy skin. Its eyes, though clouded with pain, held something else, something Olivia couldn't ignore. Desperation. It was as if the dog knew it was on the edge of death, yet still clung to hope. Olivia had seen abused animals before, but this was different. She knelt beside the pit bull, speaking softly as she reached a gentle hand toward him. He flinched, a weak whimper escaping his cracked lips, but he didn't try to run. He couldn't. Her mind raced. The usual protocol would be to call animal control or take him to the clinic for immediate care, but something inside her rebelled against that notion. This dog had been failed by humans repeatedly. He needed something more than just medical attention. He needed trust. And that's when Olivia made a shocking decision. Instead of rushing him to a sterile, unfamiliar environment filled with strangers in white coats, she carefully scooped his frail body into her arms and carried him to her car. She was taking him home. She had no idea if he would survive the night. But if he did, she was determined to show him something he had likely never known in his life. Love. The ride home was silent, except for the pit bull's ragged breathing. Olivia kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, her grip on the steering wheel tightening. Every now and then, his body twitched, as if haunted by memories of pain. She didn't know his past, but his wounds told enough of a story. Someone had tortured him, starved him, and left him to die. Not anymore. When she pulled into her driveway, she acted quickly. She wrapped him in an old blanket and carried him inside, careful not to jostle his frail body too much. The second she stepped over the threshold, she felt a shudder pass through him. Fear. Her heart ached. Had he only ever known homes filled with cruelty? She placed him gently on a thick dog bed in her living room, grabbing a bowl of water and setting it near his head. His tongue flicked out hesitantly, but his body was too weak to lift itself. Olivia reached for a syringe, filled it with water, and carefully dripped it between his lips. His eyes fluttered open again, locking onto hers. "You're safe now," she whispered. The first night was brutal. He whimpered in his sleep, his legs twitching as if trying to run from something in his nightmares. Olivia stayed by his side, dozing off in an armchair, waking up every hour to check on him. By morning, he had taken a few more sips of water and managed to lift his head. It was progress. She named him Chance. Days passed. Chance slowly gained strength. Olivia treated his wounds, fed him small meals, and spoke to him in a soothing voice whenever he stirred. But the damage went beyond his body. He flinched at sudden movements. If she raised her hand too quickly, his entire body tensed, expecting pain. He avoided eye contact, curling up tightly as if trying to disappear. One evening, as she sat on the floor near him, she reached out slowly. He tensed, but then something different happened. He sniffed her fingertips. It was small, but it was a step. A week later, he did something even more surprising. Olivia had left the front door slightly ajar while bringing in groceries. As she turned back, her stomach clenched. Chance was standing in the doorway. For a moment, she thought he would bolt. He hesitated. His eyes flicked between the open door and Olivia. Then he did something she never expected. He turned away from the door and walked back toward her. It was the first real sign that he was beginning to trust her. By the third week, Chance was noticeably stronger. His wounds had started to heal, and though he was still skittish, there was something new in his eyes, curiosity. He followed Olivia from room to room, his tail giving hesitant wags when she spoke to him. Then, one fateful night, everything changed. It was just past midnight when Olivia woke to a low, guttural growl. She sat up, heart hammering. It wasn't like Chance to growl. He rarely made a sound. She flicked on the bedside lamp and saw him standing stiffly near her bedroom door, his body tense, ears pricked forward. His hackles were raised. Then she heard it, a creak. Her blood ran cold. Someone was in the house. Chance growled again, louder this time. His entire body was rigid, but he wasn't trembling in fear. He was bracing himself. Olivia's mind raced. She had locked the doors. Who? Another noise. The faint rustling of movement near the living room. She grabbed her phone with shaky hands, about to dial 911, but before she could, Chance lunged out of the bedroom. Chance! She scrambled after him, her heart pounding. In the dim glow of the hallway light, she saw him, a dark figure, dressed in black, halfway through the window. An intruder. Chance didn't hesitate. With a deep, rumbling snarl, he launched himself at the man, teeth bared. The intruder barely had time to react before Chance clamped his powerful jaws around his arm. The man screamed. He stumbled backward, desperately trying to shake the dog off. But Chance, this once broken, beaten creature, refused to let go. The sound of sirens cut through the air. Olivia had managed to hit the emergency dial in the chaos. The intruder, bleeding and panicked, shoved at Chance with his free hand, finally breaking loose. But as he made a run for the window, Chance lunged again, snapping at his leg, sending him crashing to the floor. Moments later, red and blue lights flooded the room. Police stormed inside, guns raised, only to find a trembling Olivia, a whimpering intruder pinned beneath a fierce, growling pit bull. The officers pried the man off the ground, cuffing him as he spat out curses. He was a wanted burglar with a record of home invasions, and he would have gotten away if not for Chance. One of the officers knelt beside the pit bull, his expression softening. "Damn good dog you got there," he said. Olivia looked down at Chance. His ribs still showed. Scars still marked his body. But in that moment, he didn't look broken anymore. He looked proud. Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she knelt beside him, running her fingers through his fur. "You saved me," she whispered. For the first time since she'd found him, Chance wagged his tail without hesitation. That night, he didn't sleep in his bed on the floor. He curled up beside Olivia, his head resting on her lap. He had protected the first person who had ever protected him. And finally, after a life of pain and fear, Chance knew what it felt like to be home. The morning after the break-in, Olivia sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her, still shaken. Chance lay beside her, his body relaxed, but his eyes constantly scanning the room, as if he was still on guard. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly. "You knew," she murmured. Before I even heard him. You knew." Chance's ears twitched. It wasn't just that he had sensed an intruder. It was how he had reacted. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't cowered in fear, the way he had when she first found him. He had known what to do. How? A pit bull who had been beaten, starved, and left for dead had acted like a trained protection dog. Something didn't add up. Over the next few days, Olivia's curiosity grew. She started noticing things about Chance that she hadn't before. He was hyper-aware of his surroundings, reacting to sounds before she even heard them. The way he moved was calculated. Not the skittish movements of an abused dog, but the movements of an animal that had been trained to assess threats. And then there was his control. The night of the break-in, he had attacked, yes, but he hadn't killed. He hadn't blindly torn into the intruder in a fit of rage. Instead, he had held him down, pinning him without delivering a fatal bite. That wasn't just instinct. That was discipline. Olivia frowned as she watched him now, sleeping peacefully beside her. Who had trained him, and why had they abandoned him? Determined to find answers, Olivia took Chance to the veterinary clinic where she worked. She had treated his wounds before, but this time, she examined him with a new perspective. As she ran her hands gently over his body, she noticed something she hadn't paid close attention to before, a scar on the inside of his left ear. It wasn't from abuse. It was precise. Her breath caught in her throat. She reached for a magnifying glass, bringing it closer. There, beneath the thin layer of fur, was something unmistakable. A tattoo. A number. Her heart pounded. Dogs weren't normally tattooed unless they were part of something official. Military dogs, police, canines, specialized protection animals. Chance wasn't just a stray. He had belonged to someone who had trained him, used him, and then discarded him like trash. That night, Olivia sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, searching for answers. She had written down the number from Chance's ear and was now trying to match it to databases online. The problem? Most military or police K-9 records weren't publicly available. After hours of digging, she almost gave up until she found a private registry for retired protection dogs. She hesitated, then typed in the number. Seconds later, a result popped up. She froze. Her hands trembled as she clicked the entry. The file was minimal, but it was enough. Name, Shadow. Breed, American Pit Bull Terrier. Training, personal protection and security. Owner, redacted. Status, missing, presumed deceased. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Missing? Presumed deceased? Her mind raced. Someone had trained Chance, no, Shadow, for security work. But instead of being retired properly, he had vanished. She stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. Had he been stolen? Had he been abandoned on purpose? And the biggest question of all, who had done this to him? A deep sense of unease settled over Olivia in the following days. The more she thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. If Chance, Shadow, had belonged to a professional security firm or an individual trained in protection, why had he ended up nearly beaten to death in an alley? Someone had wanted him gone. But why? Then late one evening, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. Hello. Silence. She frowned. Who is this? A voice, low and gruff, crackled through the speaker. You have my dog? The air left her lungs. She shot a glance at Chance, who was curled up near the couch. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. A pause. Don't play dumb, lady. That dog belonged to me, and I want him back. Olivia swallowed hard. Then why did I find him nearly dead in an alley? She snapped. Silence. Then the voice turned cold. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Give him back, and we don't have a problem. The line went dead. A chill ran down her spine. She wasn't just dealing with a lost pet situation. This was something bigger, something dangerous. And whoever this man was, he wasn't asking. He was threatening. Olivia barely slept that night. She knew one thing for sure. There was no way in hell she was giving Chance back to whoever had abandoned him. She had to act fast. The next morning, she called a friend who worked with animal rescue networks. They discussed moving Chance to a safe location under a different identity. It wouldn't be easy, but there were ways to protect animals from being reclaimed by abusive owners. But before she could make arrangements, something happened that sent her stomach plummeting. Her front door was open. Not unlocked. Open. Someone had been inside. Her blood ran cold. She rushed to the living room. Chance was still there, ears perked, growling softly. Nothing had been taken, but the message was clear. They weren't asking anymore. They were coming for him. Olivia knew she had no choice. That night, she packed a bag, grabbed Chance's leash, and drove out of town. She didn't know where she was going yet, only that she had to disappear. At least for now. As she drove down the empty highway, Chance rested his head on her lap, his eyes watching the road ahead. She glanced down at him and whispered, "No one's ever going to hurt you again." His tail thumped once, and for the first time since she had found him, he looked at peace. But Olivia knew this wasn't over. Someone out there wanted him, and they weren't going to stop looking. The road stretched endlessly before Olivia, the moon casting an eerie glow over the deserted highway. The wind whispered against the car windows, but inside, silence reigned, except for the rhythmic sound of Chance's slow, steady breathing. She glanced at him, curled up in the passenger's seat, his body finally at ease. But Olivia wasn't. Her mind raced with a single thought. They're coming for him. Whoever that man was, he had resources. He had found her number, broken into her house, and left her with a silent warning. She had no doubt that if she didn't act fast, they'd take Chance from her. And this time, she wouldn't be able to save him. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. Not again. Not ever. Nowhere left to run. She had been driving for hours, heading toward the only place she could think of, a secluded cabin her uncle had left behind when he passed away. It wasn't much, just a small place in the woods, but it was safe. Off-grid, hard to track. As she turned onto the winding dirt road leading to the property, exhaustion threatened to drag her under. But she couldn't rest yet. The moment she reached the cabin, she killed the engine, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the cold night air. Chance followed, his ears perked, sensing her tension. "Come on, buddy," she whispered, leading him inside. The place was dusty but intact. Old wooden furniture, a stone fireplace. No electricity, just a few lanterns and an emergency generator. It would do. She locked the door behind them and let out a breath. They were safe. For now. The sound that changed everything. She didn't remember falling asleep, but she woke up to the low, rumbling growl vibrating from Chance's throat. Her eyes snapped open. The room was still dark, except for the dim glow of the lantern she had left on the table. Chance stood at the door, every muscle tense. His ears twitched, his body rigid. And then, a sound. Footsteps. Her heart stopped. They had found her. Olivia moved silently, grabbing the only weapon she had, a rusted old hunting knife from the kitchen drawer. A shadow flickered past the window. Her stomach clenched. Chance let out a deep, menacing snarl, his body lowering into a defensive stance. But unlike before, when he had faced the burglar, there was something different about him now. He wasn't just reacting. He was waiting, as if he knew this was it. The final fight. The confrontation. The door creaked. A second later, it burst open. Two men stormed in, dark clothes, weapons in hand. Chance launched before Olivia could even blink. A vicious snarl ripped through the cabin as he tackled the first man, knocking him to the ground. The second man raised a gun. Olivia didn't think. She lunged. Her knife sliced through the air, catching the intruder's arm. He yelped, dropping the weapon. Chance was relentless. The man beneath him screamed, trying to shove the dog off, but Chance had locked onto his forearm with an iron grip. His powerful jaws clamped down, growls deep and unyielding. The second man stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm, eyes wide with fear. "This damn dog," he choked out, but Olivia was already moving. She grabbed the fallen gun. "Get out," she hissed, aiming at him with shaking hands. The man hesitated, then bolted. His partner struggled beneath Chance's weight, but when he saw the gun pointed at him, he stilled. Chance didn't let go, not until Olivia whispered, "Enough." And just like that, Chance obeyed. He released his grip, stepping back, teeth bared, his body still trembling with adrenaline. The man gasped in pain, clutching his shredded arm, scrambling toward the door. "You come near him again," Olivia said, voice cold as steel. "And next time, he won't let go." The man didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled into the night and disappeared. Silence. Olivia's hands were still shaking. She turned to Chance. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes locked on the door, waiting to see if they would come back. Then, finally, his body sagged. She dropped to her knees beside him, running her hands over his face, his ears, his chest, making sure he wasn't hurt. "You saved me," she whispered. Chance exhaled a slow breath. And for the first time since she had found him in that alley, he leaned into her touch. The unspoken truth. They didn't leave the cabin for days. Olivia reported the break-in, and though the police investigated, there were no real leads. The men had disappeared, just as she had expected. But they wouldn't be back. Not after what had happened. Chance had chosen her. Not because of training, not because of instinct, but because she had saved him first. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Olivia traced the scar on his ear. "Whoever you were before," she murmured, "it doesn't matter now." Chance let out a soft sigh, resting his head on her lap. She smiled, running her fingers through his fur. "You're home." And this time, for the first time in his life, he believed it. Days passed, and then weeks. The fear that had once gripped Olivia so tightly slowly began to fade. She no longer jumped at shadows, no longer lay awake at night, expecting danger to creep in. Because now, she wasn't alone. Chance was always there, his quiet presence a reminder that, No matter how broken the world had left him, he had found the strength to fight for something good, to fight for her, healing together. The first time Olivia took Chance for a walk after everything that had happened, she expected him to be wary, to shrink away from people the way he used to. But to her surprise, he walked beside her with a quiet confidence, his tail no longer tucked, his eyes no longer darting in fear. He was different, stronger, and maybe she was too. One afternoon, as they sat on the cabin's porch, Olivia absent-mindedly ran her fingers through Chance's fur, feeling the scars that would never fully fade. "They hurt you," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "But they didn't break you." Chance looked up at her, his deep brown eyes calm. If anything, he seemed at peace, as if he had finally let go of the past. And in that moment, Olivia realized something. So had she. The true meaning of rescue. People often said that when you rescue an animal, you save them. But Olivia knew the truth. Sometimes, they save you right back. Chance had arrived in her life when she least expected it, when she had been too busy moving through the world without purpose, without direction. She had thought she was giving him a second chance. But in reality, he had given her one, because in saving him, she had learned what it meant to fight for something, to stand her ground, to face fear, to refuse to let the past define her. And most of all, to love without conditions. Chance didn't have to trust her. He didn't have to fight for her, to protect her. But he had, not because he had been trained to, not because it was expected, but because he chose to. And that was the most powerful thing of all. A new beginning. Months later, Olivia and Chance left the cabin behind, returning to a life that had once felt impossible. Chance wasn't just her dog. He was her protector, her best friend, her family. And as they walked together through the world, side by side, Olivia knew one thing with absolute certainty. Some bonds are forged in love, others in loyalty, but the strongest ones, the ones that last forever, they are built in trust, and Chance had trusted her. Now, it was her turn to make sure he never had to doubt that trust again, because no matter where life took them, they would always have each other.